I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a young girl is suspected of arson in one of last May's San Diego wildfires, and investigators file a formal report in another.
Plus, we take an in-depth look at why pepper spray is being used on an alarming number of juveniles in county detention centers and the request for a Justice Department investigation. Then, do you have a story you want to tell? We'll show you how one local group helps everyday San Diegans tell their stories and how you can participate. I'm Peggy Pico with those conversations just ahead.
And San Diego may be turning the page on America's finest city, at least at one downtown spot. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off tonight. A young girl appeared in court today to face charges of starting the Cocos fire in San Marcos. It was the most destructive of the fires back in May, burning 40 structures, most of them homes. The young suspect has not been identified. Even her age hasn't been given out. Her attorney asked for a mental competency evaluation. She is due back in court in 3 weeks. A formal report on the Poinsettia fire is ruling out natural causes. That one burned 600 acres and started near the 7th hole of the La Costa golf course. UT San Diego obtained an investigator's report which says the cause is still undetermined, but could have been a discarded cigarette or even a spark from a titanium golf club. Just a few months ago, researchers at UC Irvine reported sparking problems with titanium golf clubs. The University of Phoenix could bar veterans from enrolling in at least one program at its San Diego campus. The move stems from a state audit of the for-profit university. Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks joins us in the newsroom with more. Megan, tell me about the audit.
Well, the state is recommending the University of Phoenix stop enrolling veterans in 7 of its local programs, including its MBA program. The state says the school violated a rule meant to keep for-profit institutions from cobbling together programs and aggressively recruiting veterans for them so they can cash in on the GI Bill. The rule says veterans on the GI Bill can't make up more than 85% of a program cohort.
Now, the University of Phoenix has been in the news a lot lately. Can you remind us why that is?
The amount of taxpayer dollars being spent to send veterans to for-profit institutions skyrocketed between 2010 and 2013, to the extent that we're spending in the for-profit sector alone about what we were paying for the entire GI Bill just 2 years earlier. The Center for Investigative Reporting called that spending into question. It found the University of Phoenix's San Diego campus has a graduation rate of just 15%.
So what's going to come out of this audit?
Well, the California Department of Veteran Affairs says the University of Phoenix must close these programs to veterans unless it can get a waiver from the federal VA. The University of Phoenix's parent company, Apollo Education Group, is contesting the audit. It says 6 of those 7 programs are in compliance with the 85% rule, and it says the campus received high marks in every other review category, including glowing comments in interviews with students. Now, where the university and auditors agree is its bachelor's in security and management. Both parties say that program is out of compliance and will likely be closed to veterans in the fall.
We have a full list of the programs in question on our website, kpbs.org. Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks. Megan, thanks. The House has approved a landmark bill to improve health care throughout the Veterans Affairs Department. It passed on a vote of 420 to 5. The measure will let the VA hire more medical workers, open more clinics, and help vets get outside care when they can't get a prompt appointment with a VA doctor. Now, 2 of those new clinics are due to be built in San Diego County. The Senate is expected to approve the bill on Friday. The House split in another vote today, a measure allowing a lawsuit against President Barack Obama over the Affordable Care Act. The suit will claim that he exceeded his constitutional powers in enforcing the law. Republicans back the suit, saying the president went too far. Democrats call it an election year stunt. A nonpartisan investigation blames management failures for the troubled rollout of healthcare.gov. That's the federal enrollment website for the Affordable Care Act. The Government Accountability Office says the Obama administration didn't have effective planning or oversight practices, and didn't give contractors a coherent plan, leading to tens of millions of dollars in extra costs. There was also a lack of follow-up on how contractors did their jobs. The full report is due to be released tomorrow. The rollout of Obamacare cut the number of uninsured in California by more than 3 million people, but the Kaiser Family Foundation says 2.5 million are still without health insurance. And it says the state will face even bigger challenges in reaching those people. Kaiser found more than 60% of those without coverage are Latino. Nearly half are not in the country legally, and that disqualifies them from tax subsidies and low-income health programs. Last year saw a sharp uptick in the number of youngsters testing positive for methamphetamine at juvenile hall. The number was 1 in 10, up from just 4% last year. It is the highest level in 6 years. The San Diego Association of Governments also found those using the drug starting at an average age of 14 and a half. 92% were boys, 85% were Hispanic. Last night, we told you about a formal complaint filed over the use of pepper spray in San Diego County's juvenile detention centers. Peggy Pico continues our coverage.
The Youth Law Center filed the 34-page formal complaint asking the Justice Department to investigate the use of pepper spray on more than 100 juveniles in San Diego County detention centers. The incidents came to light in a series of stories co-written by City Beat Associate Editor and reporter Kelly Davis. Kelly, welcome to Evening Edition.
Thank you.
Now, how many youths does this complaint identify were improperly pepper sprayed?
Well, they found dozens of instances where there was a questionable use of pepper spray, whether it was warranted, whether the youth was doing anything to provoke the use. And then there were 147 cases where kids, there was absolutely no justification to it. They were targeted by overspray, when another detainee had been sprayed.
Give us some examples of who these youths were, maybe how old they are, and why the pepper spray was used on them. The probation department justifies the use of pepper spray by saying it's to quell violence, to stop a fight, to protect the safety of staff or of other detainees. But we found a lot of instances where a kid was suicidal and didn't immediately follow directions to strip and put on a suicide smock and was therefore pepper sprayed. Instances where probation staff assumed the kid was going to do something wrong, so it was kind of a preemptive pepper spraying. There was one case where a 12-year-old was pepper sprayed. And I understand even in your article there was a group of girls actually pepper sprayed because they refused to strip in front of
a male guard. Yeah.
Right, male guards. Okay. Well, the County Probation Department oversees juvenile detention, and they declined to talk to us. They did email us saying that they welcome the opportunity to participate in any inquiry by the Justice Department. Did they speak to you?
No, my coworker, former City Beat staff writer Dave Moss, had started reporting on this in 2012, and at the time reached out to probation and asked for comments, asked to have questions answered, was even willing to, provide the questions ahead of time, and they didn't respond. And once his story ran, and KPBS, he came on KPBS to talk about it, they provided a statement calling it inaccurate, that it wasn't very balanced. And then once we saw the complaint from the Youth Law Center on Friday, it more than justified or supported everything Dave had been reporting before, and even went beyond in the descriptions of how some of these kids were treated.
And I know you mentioned the department's policy on pepper spraying is during violent outbreaks. Mm-hmm. Based on your research, were any of the reporter spray cases that you saw in this youth law complaint or an incidents report, were they justified?
There were far more cases of troubled kids who weren't following directions fast enough that got sprayed than actual instances where it was used to break up a fight. And a lot of cases where it was used to break up a fight, it didn't do anything. It didn't help, and probation staff had to get in there and physically intervene.
How does the use of pepper spray here in the county at juvenile detention centers compare to that of other similar detention centers nationwide?
It's nationwide, about a little more than 70 juvenile justice systems don't allow guards to carry pepper spray at all. It's just not used. There are other methods to maintain control, maintain safety. So yeah, San Diego is definitely an outlier in not only using pepper spray, but the extent to which they use it.
Where does this Youth Law Center complaint go from here? There's a request by the Justice Department to investigate. And
I think it'll, within the next few weeks, the Justice Department will decide whether or not to move ahead with their investigation. If they do, they'll come in and inspect facilities, conduct interviews, and then decide whether, whether the complaint is warranted and recommend policy changes, and that could take several months to a year, I think.
All right, and just to confirm what I said, it's actually the complaint to the Justice Department. It is not stemming from the Justice Department.
Correct.
City Beat reporter and associate editor Kelly Davis, thank you.
Thank you.
A new bill could hold colleges and universities to be more accountable to victims of sexual assault on campus. It was introduced today by senators from both sides of the aisle. Lawmakers say they've heard too many stories of bungled cases. It's estimated that 1 in 5 women on college campuses will be sexually assaulted, and dozens of schools across the country are being investigated over how they handle assault cases.
This bill has teeth. If schools ignore the clear guidelines, this bill lays out that there are consequences and that they will pay a stiff price.
Now, we're not going to legislate away sexual assault, but we can make it better for the survivors coming forward. And this bill is an incredible first step in making that happen.
The bill would require schools to designate advocates for victims and to develop agreements with local law enforcement on handling assault cases. It would also increase penalties for schools that don't comply. San Diego Congresswoman Susan Davis also introduced a bill on campus assaults. She and Senator Barbara Boxer want to require victims advocates on campus. Davis is also sponsoring summer food stamps for families who qualify for free school meals. 70% of those children in San Diego are not showing up to meal programs when school is out of session. Davis says it's because of a lack of awareness and a lack of transportation, keeping the kids from getting to the programs. She says hunger could worsen what educators are calling the summer learning loss.
They're not focusing on learning, and that's going to happen. But I think it happens particularly when children truly are just not well fed during the summertime.
The bill would expand a pilot program giving parents up to 60 extra food stamp dollars during the summer months. Students in the pilot were reportedly less hungry and cost the federal government less than traditional meal programs. San Diego Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez wants to extend welfare and food stamp benefits to some immigrants living legally in the state. Gonzalez says her new bill applies to political refugees, children brought to the United States by their parents, and to military veterans and their families who are not citizens. An Assembly committee says the cost would likely run into the millions.
The cost was very large. Anytime you try to augment the CalWORK system or food stamp system, it does cost a lot. And that is a big concern. It's always an unknown because you have to factor in as if everybody would be taking advantage of it, and that just doesn't happen.
Gonzalez points to California's high poverty rate and says her bill would ensure the well-being of many lawful immigrants in the state. Tonight, the House and Senate are both working on bills to address the surge of young Central American immigrants at the border. The House bill calls for $659 million. President Barack Obama has already said that's not enough, and he promises a veto. Now, the Senate bill is for $2.7 billion, still less than Obama asked for. Congress is working on a deadline. They are set to take their summer break at the end of the week. Governor Jerry Brown says California is willing to shelter more migrant children if needed. He wrapped up his trip to Mexico City today, saying that he'll work with the U.S. government to find a long-term solution for the immigration crisis. He says he'll make it plain that California won't hesitate to help. For a few hours today, San Diego Assemblywoman Toni Atkins was Governor Atkins. Well, acting governor anyway. She was the third acting governor in a week. You may also recall that she was interim mayor of San Diego back in 2008 before Jerry Sanders took office. What a mess that is up at UCLA. 8 to 10 million gallons of water flooding the campus after a 93-year-old pipe ruptured late yesterday. It filled parking garages and it flooded the basketball court in Pauley Pavilion. That arena was renovated just 2 years ago. 6 facilities were damaged in all. School and city leaders are now considering their next steps, not only for cleanup, but for replacing aging pipelines. Cindy Martin is just 1 year into her contract as superintendent of the San Diego Unified School District, but the school board is already giving her an extension. They tacked another year onto her contract last night. The trustees praised her for embracing their vision for improving the district and for her emphasis on teaching and learning. City officials are working on changes to San Diego's municipal code regarding recall elections. It's part of the fallout from last year's scandals involving former Mayor Bob Filner. Folks organizing a recall drive found city law wasn't in line with state law. Today, a council committee directed the city clerk and city attorney to study ways to change the code. A national telephone scam has the attention of authorities in San Diego. Police say callers claiming to be Internal Revenue Service officials are tricking people into sending them money. IRS spokesman Rafael Tolino says the scammers are bullies.
They're threatening, they're insulting. They demand you go out and pay taxes a certain way, prepaid debit card, wire transfer, two most common. And then they threaten you with arrest or deportation, such as from the sheriff's department or local police. And then they call back as local police or the sheriffs, and they further the scam to the person they're calling, who generally will be a little bit shaken at that point.
Tolino says the IRS would never call asking for money. Scammers have collected more than $1 million from the thousands of victims who've been duped around the nation. 8 people in San Diego have reported the scam to police. San Diego home prices jumped nearly 12.5% over the past year. The latest Case-Shiller Home Price Index found prices are still going up, but not as fast as earlier this year. The index found that San Diego home prices have actually doubled in the past 15 years, and that happened in spite of the housing crash and the recession that followed. Analysts say the market for existing homes is positive, but construction and sales of new homes continue to lag. Paramedics may start making house calls in California, not just for emergencies, but also for patients with chronic illnesses who might otherwise wind up in the emergency room. Health officials say there are huge gaps in the healthcare system, especially for people who need help monitoring chronic conditions like diabetes to make sure that they're getting the care that they need.
There is a large role for someone with a paramedic's level of training, many different ways where they can help support the primary providers, which are usually nurses and physicians, and help bridge services.
Supporters say the change would reduce emergency room crowding.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, Congress looks to curb sexual assaults on college campuses. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
A mural promoting America's finest city may soon be history. The 25-year-old painting is starting to peel away from the side of a building on 6th Street downtown. The building's owner has talked with the artist and says repairing the mural is just too expensive. A unique literary and performing arts group routinely hosts storytelling events throughout San Diego. Peggy Pico shows us how it works and how to participate.
The 5-year-old nonprofit So Say We All is a writing and storytelling workshop that helps everyday San Diegans tell their stories in front of an audience at local venues like bars and cafes. Their latest program is a series of writing workshops for military veterans. Joining me with the details are my guests, So Say We All co-founder Justin Hudnall and Marion Wilson, professor of writing, board member, volunteer, and performer for the group's monthly showcases. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Now, Justin, why did you you help start this storytelling group?
Well, you know, the short answer is because we just felt like musicians were getting too much attention, too much access to live audience. I moved back. I'm from San Diego, and I moved back here, and a small group of writers that I was working with really felt like we wanted to have a way of kind of, you know, the reader completes the writer, and we wanted to get a break from these long stretches we took of writing and get that validation an audience gave. And then after doing what we thought was a one-off, the response we got from people who wanted to get on stage also was so great. We just kind of kept snowballing until it became a nonprofit.
Who can participate in this nonprofit, and what's the criteria for becoming a performer on the showcase?
Literally anyone can do it because everybody has a story. So we put out themes that are really, they're just as prompts to kind of contextualize a show, get the creative juices flowing. Anyone can submit, and then once they submit, we accept about 8 per showcase on average, and then put them through a month of boot camp. So you do not have to be a professional writer. I know a lot of people feel like they need permission to call themselves writers, so which is why we call them storytellers, because if you've ever had a bad day and a drink and a victim, you've told a story.
There's plenty of those around. How many people are involved?
Within the organization itself, we only have about 2 employees, myself included, and then the board, which is about 6 people, including Marion. But over the years, we've worked with literally hundreds of
participants. Now, Marion, you were one of the participants. You performed a personal story at a showcase last December. Let's take a look.
It sounds silly, but I just hadn't considered why Dad might be taking better care of himself. Perhaps I just thought that Mom's death had made him feel his own mortality. As we walked through the dairy aisle, I tried to absorb the idea that my dad was taking better care of himself because for the first time in more than 40 years, he was anticipating someone other than Mom or his doctors seeing him naked. At least he hoped so. Or maybe already had.
Now, this is a very personal story with a little bit of humor in it. Why did you want to tell it before an audience?
Well, as many people know, you know, losing someone close to you, you know, you just say something like, my mom died. I mean, there's so much more to it than that. It doesn't, that's not the story. That's not the experience of it. And so, and I knew I wasn't alone. I know people have their parents pass away. And so putting it out there helped me feel less alone because I did have people come up to me afterwards saying, I had that Christmas too.
Now, Justin, I know some of your writers, like Marion, share these very personal, embarrassing, or sometimes very touching stories. Why do you think they're sharing these types of stories? What do you think it does for the performers and the audience as well?
Well, I mean, I think what Marion hit on is the phenomenon that really kind of answers that question. Every time anybody who's like a first-timer gets really nervous before they're about to get on stage, I always tell them it's going to go by in a second, and then afterwards there's going to be a line of people who want to tell you their story. And so what I think is happening is, you know, we really just know so little about each other. We air so little of our laundry, and it's a protective instinct, but really once you start unburdening yourself and telling that story, and telling it artfully, and with a mind of connecting with other people, what you get is this kind of laugh of recognition and then the shared experience. And I think it's a way of getting rid of these awful things we carry around with us, like shame and guilt and regret and all these things that wear us down over time. When you own your story, it stops having power over you.
And just briefly, we'll have to end on this, Marion. So Say We All does community outreach, and right now there's a focus on writing workshops for veterans. Tell us how that's been going.
It's fantastic. We have we're working with the San Diego Public Library, and we're reaching out to veterans of all ages, recent veterans, veterans from decades ago, to talk about the idea of homecoming, right? Something that is a shared experience among veterans, and to get them to share their story of their homecoming. And so we have workshops, and we're trying to put together a publication of these stories.
Well, that'll be interesting. We have a lot more about that on our website, kpbs.org. Marion Wilson and Justin Hednall, thank you very much. And I want to let folks know that the next So Say We All storytelling showcase is tomorrow night, Thursday, July 31st, at the Whistle Stop in South Park. The performance starts at 8:30.
Warm temperatures are going to continue around San Diego for the rest of the week. You can look for upper 70s along the coast Morning clouds and some afternoon clearing. It's going to be in the upper 80s for the inland valleys with partly cloudy skies. Tomorrow is expected to be hot up in the mountains, low 90s in the temperature, and then dropping a few degrees as we head into the weekend. And then if you look out into the desert, going to be sunny with triple digits over the next 3 days or so. Recapping tonight's top stories, a young girl appeared in court today, faced charges of starting the Cocos fire in San Marcos. It was the most destructive of those fires back in May, burning 40 structures, most of them homes. The young suspect has not been identified. Even her age has not been given out. Her attorney is asking for a mental competency evaluation, and she is due back in court in 3 weeks. And the University of Phoenix could bar veterans from enrolling in at least one program at its San Diego campus. The move stems from a state audit of the for-profit university. The state says the school violated a rule on how many veterans can be in a program. The limit is 85%. It's intended to keep institutions from aggressively recruiting vets in order to cash in on the GI Bill. Now, of course, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. We'd like to thank you for joining us. Hope you have a great evening.